Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roland Ottley. I am a physician assistant, and I'm also an attorney with the Ottley Law Firm. Thank you for joining me here this evening. Today we are going to discuss the topic of the surge in coronavirus cases in half of the states, more than half of the states at this time, and what does that mean for the other states that have a stable or decreasing number of coronavirus cases. Okay, so it has been reported that about 33 states are showing increasing infection rates and increased hospitalizations of their community members. States with record new cases include Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah. The other states and many of the other states are showing increased rates, some more increased rates of infection as opposed to increased hospitalizations. About 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the concern that the protests for police brutality and racial injustice may have caused an increase in the number of cases because of the protests. I'm here to inform you that that really has not happened. So then, why are we having increased cases? And let's look at that. The protesters, for the most part, wore masks. They did not adhere to social distancing because of the nature of their demonstration, but they did wear masks, and that proved to be very helpful. Because when the experts are asked, why do we have these increased cases, they point to a number of things, but they do not point to the protesters for racial injustice. That they do not do. Okay, so here are some of the reasons for the spikes that we've been seeing, mostly in the west and the south of the country. Political events without masks. Unfortunately, the Trump administration and President himself and the Vice President have been for a long time failing to wear masks to encourage others to do so. So as a result, his base and those who support him tend not to wear masks. As we had discussed before, the weather's much warmer now, and wearing a mask goes along with more discomfort, and it's just not a very pleasant thing to have to wear the mask. You have to be mentally brave and determined to wear the mask sometimes in these hot and humid conditions. But you must understand why there's the need to wear the mask. Okay, so because masks are not being worn in these events, that is one important reason for this transmission. The other thing is some of these political events have taken place indoors as opposed to outdoors, and we understand that when there's a crowd indoors, that does increase the rate of infection of the coronavirus. So as the protesters, when you compare the protesters for racial injustice, they were all outside for the most part. They did not have any inside demonstrations. Okay. Now, some of these states were in a hurry to reopen And so what happened is that um, they never really, their community, their citizenry never really adhered strongly and predominantly to the precautions that were needed to avoid infection. So when these states reopened quite early, and some of them reopened even though their numbers were going up, that certainly would cause what we're witnessing right now to occur. Um, the failure to at least wear a mask, which now is shown to be one of the very important things, even if you don't distance practice social distancing. If you do wear the mask, that is a very crucial factor in terms of whether you get infected or not. So there's also the factor that there's increased testing now. So of course, as we test more, we will tend to find an increase in the number of cases. And the testing is needed because that is probably the only way that we're going to find out who are the asymptomatic persons with coronavirus out there. Otherwise, these asymptomatic individuals could continue spreading this virus, and they could continue spreading it to those who, once they contract the virus, are also asymptomatic. So no one will really know from whom they contracted this infection. So that's why the testing is needed, and it is so crucial because once you've been able to identify the asymptomatic individuals, then you would notify them and instruct them to quarantine so that they don't go on to infect other individuals. Now, one of the other things that these states with these record numbers of coronavirus now failed or was slow to implement was the contact tracing, so that when those who are infected go back and consider where they've been and who they might have been in contact with, then you could go to those individuals and get them tested to see if they are infected even before they may have started showing symptoms. And that wasn't done adequately in these states. So as a result, those who are infected cannot be traced to contact with other individuals that may have been tested and could have been notified to quarantine themselves before going on to spread it to someone else. By the way, the percentage of individuals who were protesting who are actually infected from various states show that number is less than 3% of all of those thousands of people who are out there protesting against police brutality and racial injustice. So clearly, those individuals did not significantly increase the number of infections in the areas where they were protesting. I wasn't able to find any published studies that showed the infection rate in the protesters throughout the nation, but for some of the states I was able to do so. Now, I want to make clear, according to the experts on this matter, what we're seeing here with the increased cases in these states is not a second wave. It is a failure to control the first wave. Some of these states were not really hit that hard, and I guess because they were not hit that hard and they did not see a large number of infected individuals in their states, and then people traveling from one state to the next, and then the failure to roll back the reopening, to implement contact tracing, also led to the failure to control the first wave. So again, now I think for the first time that I'm aware of, I see that the vice president is actually encouraging those in those Republican states to wear a mask because it's so crucial. So hopefully that request from the vice president will encourage more of the Trump administration base and other Republicans to wear a mask so that we could get control of this virus and be able to reopen more states, because a lot of states, at least half of them now, have sort of rolled back their reopening or implemented some restrictions to reopening. Now, for those states that are seeing these record numbers, the Secretary of Health was interviewed not too long ago, I think a day or two ago, and he assured us that these hospitals in these states have proper and sufficient personal protective equipment. So that would indicate that the healthcare workers in those states will have very low exposure to contracting coronavirus during the time that they'll have to deal with this massive influx of infected individuals. They've also been able to modify and to create the necessary bed capacity for their areas with the help of federal and state government. They also have pretty much the therapies that we've now know would be beneficial for treating patients with coronavirus, and the experience of those states like New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey that have been hit with the infections earlier during the year, and were able to maneuver and overcome the rising number of cases that we witnessed here in New York, and we were able to flatten the curve. And even though we've had protests in New York City, we have not seen a spike in the number of coronavirus cases here in New York City, and we seem to be on track to open up with the third phase on July 6th. So the experience from other states, those on the eastern side, will help those in the western side of the country to be able to deal with the surging cases. Now, here I'd like to include an update on the coronavirus and research that's ongoing. One of the things that scientists were able to identify was that when the coronavirus infects a cell, it takes over the cell's communication inside the cell and the cell's communication with other cells around it. And it causes the cells that it infects to grow these tentacles, as they philopods, as they were called by scientists, and they believe that these tentacles help to spread the virus to nearby cells. And in more research, scientists have been able to identify approximately 332 genes 332 proteins, human proteins, that interact with 27 of the viral proteins to assist the virus in infecting and controlling and the cells and evading the immune system. This type of research will certainly help us to better understand how this virus works and help us to understand ways in which we can interfere with the normal function of this virus so that we can eradicate it and cure someone from its infections. Now, new therapies for coronavirus came about from studying hundreds, if not thousands, of various therapies that have already been approved by the FDA or other governmental agencies, and also another branch is the investigation of the virus and how it infects, and understanding that, and then developing therapies that are specific to that acquired knowledge of how the virus infects and how it continues to survive within the body. That line of investigation and therapy is going to take a much longer time. It's much easier to use medications that we've already have experience with to see if those medications would be effective against the virus. So after all, at this point now, I'm also concerned because of what's happening out there in the West Coast. I'm hoping that the leaders there would be able to identify what they need to do and get it done to control this viral infection and stop the record-breaking numbers on a daily and weekly basis. Because if that's not done because of the freedom of travel, we could start seeing in other states an increase in the number of coronavirus cases, and eventually the increase in the number of hospitalizations, and that we do not want to see. We do not want to repeat that here in New York. So I am asking everyone who may listen to this presentation to please wear your mask. We now understand, New York's a prime example. We've had large thousands of people protesting, but the majority, the predominant number of those protesters wore masks, and they were outside, and they did not cause a spike in the number of cases that we're seeing here in New York City. So even if you can't social distance, you certainly could wear a mask, and that has a significant impact on preventing you from getting infected. Please continue to wash your hands and to not touch your mouth, nose, or eyes before you wash your hands. And I want to ask everyone out there listening to encourage those in your community to wear their mask, to social distance, to wash their hands, and to not touch their face, their mouth, their nose, and their eyes, and to encourage parents to have their children wear a mask as well, so that the children can get accustomed to wearing this mask to protect themselves, and they should also be informed and educated as to why it is important for them to wear a mask. Hopefully adults may be encouraged to wear a mask because they see even the kids are responsible enough to wear a mask if the parents have been able to ingrain that in their children. So at this point, we'll have to wait and see what happens next week and how the control of these states on the west side do in responding to this coronavirus spike. And in the meantime, I want to thank you all for listening, and hope to see you next week. And may God bless you. Thank you very much.